Hey, my name's Aiden. I'm 23 and I work construction in a small town just outside Aspen, Colorado. It's not the kind of place you'd find on a postcard, even though Aspen's got its fancy ski resorts and million-dollar chalets up the road. Where I live, it's quieter, think dusty gravel roads, one gas station and a diner that's been serving the same greasy burgers since my dad was a kid. I rent a one-room apartment above a hardware store, cheap enough that I can make ends meet on my paycheck. Every morning I hop on my beat-up mountain bike pedal 3 miles to my uncle's construction yard work, 9 hours under the sun or snow, and come home to a microwave dinner or a can of soup. That's my life, and I'm okay with it. I'm not chasing anything big, never was. I didn't go to college. Wasn't for me. I'm not great with words or books, never could sit still long enough to write an essay or charm a room. But give me a hammer, a level, or a stack of lumber, and I'm in my zone. There's something about measuring twice, cutting once, and seeing a pile of boards turn into something solid. Something that lasts. My uncle says I've got a knack for it, says I'm better with my hands than he ever was. That's enough for me. Most days I'm out there nailing frames, hauling drywall, or patching roofs. It's honest work, the kind that leaves you sore but satisfied. A couple weeks ago, my uncle's company got a new job. Nothing huge, just a renovation gig for a house in the nicer part of town, well, as nice as it gets out here. The clients were the Whitmores, an older couple, probably in their 50s, with a big place in the suburbs. They didn't live in the main house full-time, it was more like a vacation spot they'd visit a few times a year. The job was to fix up a smaller cabin in their backyard, a little wooden place tucked behind a grove of pine trees. Used to belong to Mrs. Whitmore's mother, they said, but it had been empty since she passed a few years back. The cabin needed work, rotted floorboards, a sagging porch, and a perimeter fence that looked like it had been chewed up by time and weather. My uncle put me on it solo, which was fine by me. I like working alone. Less chatter, more focus. The first 2 days were straightforward. I showed up at dawn, tools slung over my shoulder, and got to it. Tore out the old fence posts, replaced the rotted ones, and started measuring for new boards. The Whitmores weren't around much. They'd stop by to check progress, nod politely, then head back to wherever they were staying. Nice enough folks, just not the type to hover. I didn't mind. The air was crisp, the mountains loomed in the distance, and the work kept my hands busy and my head quiet. That's all I needed. Then came day 3. It was a Wednesday, one of those Colorado mornings where the sky's so blue it almost hurts to look at. I was hauling a bucket of paint from the truck to the backyard, sweat already beading under my flannel, despite the chill. The cabin's fence was half done, and I was planning to start painting the new posts that afternoon. I'd just set the bucket down near the garden path when I heard a voice, clear but soft, cut through the morning quiet. "Careful there, that gate swings shut with the wind. Could clip your foot if you're not watching." I looked up, startled, nearly dropping the paint. She was standing on the porch of the main house, leaning against the doorframe like she'd been there a while. Her hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, a few dark strands falling free. She wore an oversized sweater, gray, and soft-looking over-faded jeans. No makeup, no jewelry, just this effortless way about her that made the whole scene feel like a photograph. Not the kind you'd see in a glossy magazine, but one you'd find in an old album, the kind that makes you pause and wonder about the story behind it. I straightened up, brushing my hands on my work pants, suddenly aware of the sawdust on my shirt and the dirt under my nails. Thanks for the heads up." I said, my voice rougher than I meant it to be. "Didn't see you there." She gave a small smile, the kind that doesn't show teeth but still feels warm. "Didn't mean to sneak up on you. I'm Elena the Whitmore's daughter. Just here for a couple weeks." "Aiden," I said, nodding, not sure if I should step closer or just keep my distance. "I'm fixing up the cabin. Your parents' place, I mean." I figured she said, her eyes flicking to the pile of lumber behind me. "Looks like you've got your hands full." "Yeah, keeps me busy." I shifted my weight, feeling the weight of her gaze. It wasn't judgmental or anything, just steady. Like she was seeing me, not just the guy with the hammer. I don't know why, but it made my chest tighten like I'd forgotten how to stand still. "Well, don't let me distract you," she said, pushing off the doorframe. "Just wanted to make sure you didn't lose a toe to that gate." Her smile widened just a fraction, then she turned and disappeared back into the house. I stood there for a second, the paint bucket still at my feet, the mountain air cool against my skin. My hands itched to get back to work, but my head was somewhere else entirely. I didn't know much about Elena Hell. I didn't know anything, but something about her stuck with me. Maybe it was the way she carried herself, like she'd seen enough of the world to not be fazed by it. Or maybe it was that look in her eyes, the kind that made you feel like you were more than just a guy swinging a hammer. Whatever it was, I shook it off and grabbed my tools. I had a fence to finish. But as I drove the first nail into the wood, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, just a little, like the ground under my feet wasn't as steady as it had been before. The next morning, I was back at the Whitmore's place before the sun had fully cleared the mountains. Aspen's air had that sharp, clean bite, the kind that wakes you up even if you're still shaking off a bad night's sleep. I'd tossed and turned longer than usual, Elena's face flickering in my head like a stubborn ember that wouldn't go out. It wasn't just that she was pretty, plenty of women are. It was something else, something in the way she'd looked at me like she saw more than the guy in dusty work boots. I told myself to quit overthinking it. I had a job to do, boards to cut, paint to lay down. No time for daydreams. I set up near the cabin, laying out my tools on a tarp hammer level, a stack of fresh cedar planks for the fence. The plan was to finish replacing the rotted post by noon, maybe start painting if the weather held. The sky was clear, but Colorado's moods could shift faster than you could blink. I was halfway through sinking a new post when I heard footsteps crunching on the gravel path behind me. I didn't turn around right away, figuring it was Mr. Whitmore coming to check my progress. He'd done that yesterday, all polite nods and quick questions before driving off in his polished SUV. Morning came, her voice soft but clear like the chime of a bell in the quiet. I turned and there was Elena holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. She wore a flannel shirt tucked into jeans, her hair still loose, catching the early light. Thought you might need this. It's cold out here. I wiped my hands on my jeans, feeling a little caught off guard. Thanks, I said, stepping over to take the mug. Our fingers brushed for half a second, and I swear my pulse jumped like I'd touched a live wire. The coffee smelled strong, dark, the kind I'd brew myself if I had the patience. Didn't expect room service on a job site. She laughed, a low sound that felt like it belonged to the mountains. Don't get used to it. I just had extra and didn't want it to go to waste. She took a sip from her own mug, her eyes scanning the half-finished fence. You're making quick work of this. Trying to, I said, glancing at the posts. Old fence was falling apart. Your folks want it solid before winter hits. She nodded, leaning against a tree, her boots scuffing the dirt. This place meant a lot to my grandma. She'd sit out here every summer watching the sunset. Mom and Dad want to keep it alive, like a piece of her. I didn't know what to say to that. I'm not great with sentimental stuff, but the way Elena said it, calm and matter-of-fact, made it feel real. That's a good reason to fix it up, I said, finally taking a sip of the coffee. It was perfect. No sugar, just bitter enough to keep me sharp. You sticking around to help them with it. For a bit, she set her gaze drifting to the mountains. I live in Denver, work as a photographer. Portraits, landscapes, that kind of thing. But I needed a break. Too much city noise, not enough. This. She gestured at the pines, the open sky. What about you? You always been a mountain guy. Born and raised, I said, setting the mug down on a flat stone. Never left Colorado, probably never will. I like it here. It's quiet and the work's honest. She tilted her head, studying me like I was one of her photographs. Honest work. That's rare. Most people I know are chasing something, money, fame, whatever. You seem grounded. I shrugged, feeling my cheeks heat up a little. Not much to chase around here, just try to do a good job, keep the bills paid. That's enough for some, she said. And there was something in her tone, like she meant it, but was also testing the waters. We stood there for a moment, the silence settling between us, not awkward, but heavy, with something unspoken. Then she pushed off the tree. I'll let you get back to it. Don't freeze out here. Thanks for the coffee, I called as she walked back toward the house. She raised a hand without turning, and I watched her go, the flannel shirt swaying slightly with her steps. I shook my head, grabbed my hammer, and got back to work, but my focus was shot. Over the next few days, it became a pattern. Elena would show up sometimes with coffee, sometimes with a jug of lemonade she'd made herself. We'd talk while I worked nothing deep, at first just small stuff. She'd ask about the tools, how I knew where to cut or what to measure. I'd explain, probably sounding dumber than I meant to, but she listened like it mattered. One morning, she sat on the porch steps, watching me sand down a fence post. I caught her staring longer than usual, her chin resting on her hand. Something wrong, I asked, wiping sweat off my forehead with the back of my arm. She shook her head, a small smile tugging at her lips. No, I've never seen someone work like that. Like you're sure of every move. It's kind of calming to watch. I laughed, embarrassed, not sure how to take it. It's just a fence, not exactly brain surgery. Maybe not, she said, her eyes steady on mine. But it's solid. You're building something that'll last. That's not nothing. I didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever put it like that before, like my work was more than just nails and wood. I mumbled something about getting back to it and turned away, but her words stuck with me like a splinter I couldn't pull out. We started sharing lunches after that, nothing fancy, just sandwiches she'd throw together or leftovers from the Whitmore's fridge. I'd tell her about growing up in Aspen fishing with my dad before he moved away, learning to fix things because it was cheaper than hiring someone. She'd talk about her photography, how she loved capturing moments that felt fleeting like a sunset or a stranger's smile. She'd been married once, she mentioned in passing, but it didn't work out. She didn't sound bitter, just tired, like it was a chapter she'd closed but hadn't forgotten. Each day I found myself looking forward to her showing up. It wasn't just the coffee or the sandwiches, it was her. The way she listened, really listened, when I rambled about lumber or weather. The way she'd laugh at my bad jokes, not out of pity, but like she actually got me. I wasn't stupid. I knew she was older, probably had a whole life I couldn't touch in Denver, clients, galleries, people who spoke her language. I was just a guy with a hammer, no college degree, no big plans. But when she looked at me, none of that seemed to matter. And that scared me a little because, for the first time in a long time, I was starting to want something I wasn't sure I could have. The sky had been clear all morning, but by mid-afternoon the Colorado weather did what it does best, turned on a dime. A gray haze rolled in from the mountains, and before I knew it, a light drizzle started tapping against my cap. I was on the last stretch of the fence brushing paint over the final cedar posts. The air smelled of wet pine and fresh paint, and my hands were stiff from the cold. I could have packed up Rain's no friend to a paint job, but I was stubborn. The Whitmores wanted this done by the end of the week, and I wasn't about to let a little water slow me down. I glanced toward the house, half expecting Elena to be inside, staying dry like any sensible person would. But there she was, sitting on the porch steps of the cabin, sheltered just enough by the overhang. She had her knees pulled up, a mug cradled in her hands, and that old film camera of hers resting beside her. She wasn't looking at her phone or reading or doing anything to pass the time. She was watching me, her eyes steady through the mist, like I was the only thing worth noticing in the whole damn yard. "You're gonna ruin that paint job?" she called out, her voice cutting through the soft patter of rain. There was a teasing edge to it, but not mean-spirited, more like she was testing me. "It'll dry," I shot back, dipping the brush into the can. Truth was, I wasn't sure it would, but I wasn't about to admit that. I kept painting my strokes slower now, more deliberate, feeling her gaze on me like a weight I didn't mind carrying. She didn't say anything for a while, just sat there sipping her coffee or whatever it was. The drizzle picked up, not a downpour, but enough to soak my flannel and make my boots slick against the grass. I could feel the water trickling down my neck, cold against my skin, but I kept going. Something about her watching made me want to finish, like it wasn't just about the fence anymore. Then I heard the shutter click. I glanced over, and she had the camera up, lens pointed at me. She lowered it, a small smile tugging at her lips, like she'd caught something she didn't want to lose. "What's that for?" I asked, wiping my hands on my jeans, the paintbrush dangling at my side. "You looked focused," she said, setting the camera down. "I like capturing things like that, moments that feel real." I snorted, shaking my head. "Real? I'm just a guy getting wet and making a mess." She stood up, stepping out from under the overhang, letting the rain dust her hair and shoulders. "That's what makes it real," she said, her voice softer now, almost drowned out by the rain. "You're not pretending to be anything. You're just you." My throat tightened, and I didn't know why. Maybe it was the way she said it, like it was a compliment I didn't deserve. I set the brush down on the paint can, my hands suddenly feeling too heavy. "You don't get out much, do you?" I said, trying to keep it light, but my voice came out rougher than I meant. She laughed, a sound that felt warmer than the rain was cold. "Maybe not, but I know what I like to see." She took a step closer, the gravel crunching under her boots. The rain was steady now, not heavy, but enough to make her sweater cling to her shoulders, her hair sticking to her neck. She didn't seem to care. You know, I used to think I was drawn to people who had it all figured out, the ones who could talk their way through anything, who knew exactly what to say. Lawyers, artists, city types. But watching you out here, She paused, her eyes locking onto mine. I'm starting to think I was wrong about that. I froze. The rain was falling harder now, dripping off the brim of my cap, but I barely noticed. Her words hit me like a hammer, not because they were loud or dramatic, but because they were honest. I could see it in her face and the way her eyes didn't waver or didn't hide. She meant it, and it scared the hell out of me because I wasn't used to being seen like that, not by anyone, let alone someone like her. What are you saying, Elena? I asked, my voice low, almost swallowed by the rain. I took a step closer, close enough to see the water beating on her eyelashes. My heart was thumping louder than the drizzle, louder than anything. She didn't back away. I'm saying... She hesitated like she was weighing her words, choosing them carefully. I'm saying you make things feel solid. Safe. Like I don't have to be someone I'm not. I've spent a lot of years with people who wanted me to be their version of perfect. My ex-husband, she stopped, shook her head like she didn't want to go there. You're different, you're just... here. And I like that. I didn't know what to say. My head was spinning, trying to make sense of it. Me? The guy who could barely string a sentence together without tripping over his own tongue. The guy who lived on instant noodles and rode a bike because he couldn't afford a car. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came out. The rain filled the silence, a steady hum between us. She took another step close enough now that I could smell the faint trace of her coffee, the damp wool of her sweater. You don't have to say anything, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I just wanted you to know. For a moment, we just stood there, the rain falling around us, the world shrinking to the space between her eyes and mine. I wanted to reach out to touch her hand, to say something that matched the weight of what she'd just given me. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I knotted my throat tight and picked up the paintbrush again like that was the only thing I knew how to do. She smiled, small and knowing, like she understood. Then she turned and walked back to the porch, leaving me standing there, soaked to the bone, the fence half-painted and my head a mess. I went back to work, but every stroke of the brush felt different now, like I wasn't just building a fence anymore. I was building something else, something I didn't have a name for yet, but I knew I didn't want it to end. The rain didn't last long, just enough to leave the ground damp and the air heavy with the smell of wet earth and pine. The next day, the sun was back, burning through the morning mist, turning the Whitmore's backyard into a patchwork of light and shadow. I was back at the cabin, nailing the last few boards into the fence, my hands moving on autopilot while my head was still stuck on yesterday. Elena's words kept looping in my mind. You make things feel solid. Safe, like they were carved into the wood I was working with. I didn't know what to do with that. Part of me wanted to run from it, to keep my head down and finish the job. But another part, the part that kept me up half the night, wanted to lean into it to see where it could go. Elena showed up around 10, same as usual, carrying a thermos of lemonade this time. Her hair was down, catching the sunlight in a way that made it look almost golden at the edges. She wore a faded denim jacket over a white t-shirt, and her boots crunched softly on the gravel as she walked over. You survived the rain, she said, her voice light, but with that same steady undertone that made my chest tighten. Barely, I said, setting down my hammer. I took the thermos she offered, our fingers brushing again, and I swear it was like a spark you could almost see. Thanks. You didn't have to keep bringing me stuff, you know. I know, she said, leaning against a finished section of the fence. But it's nice to have an excuse to come out here. She smiled, and it wasn't the polite kind of smile you give a stranger. It was real, like she was letting me in on something private. I took a sip of the lemonade, tart, cold, perfect, and tried to act normal, like my heart wasn't thumping against my ribs. You're gonna spoil me, I said, half joking, but my voice came out quieter than I meant. I'll start expecting this every day. Maybe you should, she said, her eyes holding mine for a beat too long. Then she looked away toward the cabin like she needed a second to reset. How's it coming along? The fence, I mean. Almost done, I said, gesturing at the posts. Just a few more nails, some touch-up paint, and it'll be solid. Your folks should be happy. They will be, she said, but her tone made it clear she wasn't thinking about her parents. She stepped closer, inspecting the work, her fingers brushing the smooth edge of a post. You're good at this. It's not just a fence, it's like art in a way. Every piece fits. Nothing's out of place. I laughed, scratching the back of my neck, feeling the heat creep up my face. Art's a stretch. It's just wooden nails. You're the one with the real art. I nodded toward the camera she'd left on the porch yesterday. Those pictures you take, they've got something. I don't know how to explain it, but they're different. She tilted her head, surprised like she wasn't used to hearing that. You think so? Yeah, I said, and I meant it. The way you caught me yesterday in the rain, it wasn't just a snapshot. It felt like you saw something I didn't even know was there. Her smile softened, and for a moment she didn't say anything. Then she walked back to the porch, picked up her camera, and held it out. Want to try it? She asked. I could show you how it works. It's an old film camera, so it's a little tricky, but it's fun. I hesitated, my hands still grimy from the morning's work. I'll probably break it, I said, only half joking. I'm better with hammers than fancy stuff like that. It's not fancy, she said, stepping closer, the camera dangling from its strap. And you won't break it. Come on, Aiden, let me teach you something. I couldn't say no to that, not with the way she was looking at me like she actually believed I could do it. So I wiped my hands as best I could and followed her to a patch of grass near the cabin. She showed me how to hold the camera, how to twist the lens to focus, how to frame a shot. Her hands brushed mine as she adjusted my grip, and every time it felt like the air got a little thinner. Look through the viewfinder, she said, standing close enough that I could smell the faint lavender of her shampoo. See the world the way the camera does. It's all about what you choose to keep in the frame. I tried squinting through the lens, aiming at the fence, the trees, anything to distract myself from how close she was. Like this, I asked, turning the camera toward her without thinking. She laughed, ducking out of the frame. Not me. I'm the one behind the camera, remember? But then she softened, stepping back into view. Fine, go ahead. Just one. I clicked the shutter, my hands steadier than I expected. She stood there, the mountains behind her, her hair catching the breeze, and I knew, even without seeing the photo, it'd be something I'd want to keep. You're a natural, she said, taking the camera back. Maybe I'll make you my apprentice. Yeah, right, I said, but I was grinning, feeling lighter than I had in days. Maybe you should stick to taking my picture. You're better at it. She raised an eyebrow, playful. Careful. I might take you up on that. I was thinking about doing a portrait of you. You know, capture those hands that build things. Call it a study in solidity. I didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever talked about me like that, like I was worth capturing. If you say so, I mumbled, turning back to the fence to hide how flustered I was. But she didn't let it go. I'm serious, she said, her voice quieter now. There's something about you, Aiden. The way you work, the way you show up. It's worth seeing. We spent the rest of the afternoon like that, her teaching me about light and shadows, me, showing her how to use a tape measure to check the fence posts. We ate lunch together on the porch steps, peanut butter sandwiches and apples. Nothing fancy, but it felt like a feast. She told me more about her life in Denver, how she'd spent years chasing deadlines, building a name as a photographer, but always felt like something was missing. I told her about my dream of maybe starting my own crew someday, nothing big, just enough to call my own. She listened, really listened, and for the first time I felt like that dream wasn't so far out of reach. As the days went on, we got closer but careful. We didn't talk about what was happening, didn't name it. When her parents were around, we kept it polite, professional me, the worker, her the daughter. But when it was just us, it was different. A brush of hands, a shared laugh, a look that lingered too long. I knew it wasn't just in my head anymore. She felt it too. And every time she showed up with that camera or that thermos, it was like she was building something with me, something neither of us was ready to say out loud. But it was there, growing as solid as the fence I was putting up, and I didn't want it to end. The last day of the job came faster than I expected. The sun was high, the air crisp with that late Colorado chill that warned of winter creeping in. I'd finished the fence 2 days ago, all the posts painted the wood, sanded smooth, every nail driven straight. The Whitmore's backyard looked like something out of a magazine now, the little cabin standing proud behind its new perimeter, ready to hold whatever memories they wanted to keep alive. My work was done, and my uncle had already lined up another gig across town. I should have been satisfied, ready to move on. But as I packed my tools into the bed of my truck, my chest felt heavy, like I was leaving something behind that wasn't mine to take. Elena hadn't come out that morning. I'd seen her dad earlier, shaking my hand, thanking me for the job well done. Mrs. Whitmore had stopped by too, offering a plate of cookies and a polite smile before heading back to the main house. But Elena was nowhere. No thermos of lemonade, no camera, no quiet laugh from the porch steps. I told myself it was fine. She had her own life, probably packing to head back to Denver. Whatever had been growing between us, those lunches, those moments under the rain, maybe it was just a fleeting thing like one of her photographs. A moment caught, then gone. Still, as I loaded the last of my gear, I kept glancing at the house, hoping to see her one more time. I slammed the truck's tailgate shut, the sound echoing in the quiet yard. My bike was propped against a tree, ready to carry me back to my apartment, back to my routine of instant noodles and early mornings. I climbed into the driver's seat, ready to pull out when something caught my eye. Tucked under the windshield wiper was a small envelope, no bigger than a postcard, flapping lightly in the breeze. My heart gave a quick thud. I stepped out, grabbed it, and turned it over in my hands. No name, no writing, just the weight of something inside. I opened it carefully, like it might break if I moved too fast. Inside was a photograph, one of hers, printed on thick, matte paper. It was me, hammer in hand, standing by the fence, the afternoon sun slanting across my shoulders. My face was half turned, focused on the work, but there was something in the way she'd caught me, something I didn't recognize in myself. The light hit just right, making the dust on my jeans and the sweat on my brow look almost deliberate, like I belonged there. It wasn't just a snapshot. It was art, the kind she'd talked about, the kind that saw more than the surface. Taped to the back of the photo was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it, my fingers clumsy, and read the words written in her neat, looping handwriting. If you want to build another fence, maybe start with my heart. My breath caught, and I read it again, slower, letting each word sink in. It wasn't a love letter, not exactly, but it was more than I'd ever expected. It was an invitation, a door left open, a chance to be something more than the guy who fixed her parents' cabin. I stood there, the photo in one hand, the note in the other, the mountain stretching out behind me. The world felt quiet, like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to decide what came next. I looked back at the house, the cabin, the fence I'd spent weeks building. It was solid, sure, but what Elena had given me was something else, something that felt bigger, scarier, but worth it. I thought about my life, the routine I'd settled into, the way I'd always kept my head down, never asking for more than what I had. And then I thought about her, the way she'd looked at me in the rain, the way she'd listened when I talked about my small dreams, the way she'd made me feel like I was enough. I tucked the photo and note into my pocket, climbed onto my bike, and started pedaling back toward the Whitmore's place. My truck could wait. I didn't know what I was going to say when I got there, didn't have a plan or a speech. All I knew was that I couldn't leave without seeing her, without telling her that her words had landed somewhere deep, somewhere I didn't even know I had. When I reached the house, I saw her. She was standing on the porch of the cabin, leaning against the railing, her hair loose and catching the wind. No thermos, no camera. Just her watching the road like she'd been waiting for me to come back. I dropped my bike against a tree, my boots crunching on the gravel as I walked toward her. Her eyes met mine, steady and clear, and I saw it again. That look, the one that made me feel like I was more than just a guy with a hammer. "Hey," I said, stopping a few feet away, my hands shoved in my pockets to keep them still. "Got your note." She smiled, small and a little nervous, like she wasn't sure what I'd do with it. "Yeah, what did you think?" I pulled the photo out, holding it up. "This is something else. You make me look better than I am." "No," she said, stepping closer, her voice soft but sure. "I just showed you what I see." We stood there for a moment, the space between us charged like the air before a storm. I took a breath, steadying myself. "That thing you wrote," I said, my voice low, "about building another fence? You mean it?" She nodded, her eyes never leaving mine. "I do, but only if you're ready to pick up the hammer." I laughed, a real laugh, the kind that felt like letting go. "I'm pretty good with hammers," I said, "but I might need some help figuring out the rest." She stepped closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of green in her eyes, the way her lips curved just a little. "I've got time," she said. "If you do." I didn't kiss her, didn't pull her into some movie-style embrace, but I held out my hand and she took it, her fingers warm and steady against mine. We didn't need to say anything else right then. The photo in my pocket, the fence behind us, the mountains watching it was enough. I didn't know where this would go, if she'd stay in Aspen or head back to Denver, if we'd be anything more than this moment. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of wanting more. I'd built something solid once, and maybe I could build something with her too. Not a fence, not a cabin, but something real, something that could last.